the spill. In 1994, I had just gotten my first car, and this car was a '85 Honda Civic. So in 1994, I got my first car, which was a '85 Honda Civic. Now, what was one of the things that was missing in this '85 Honda Civic that all cars in the '80s were lacking? That important feature was something called a cup holder. So cars in '85 did not, if you can remember, cars in 1985 did not have cup holders. You'd have to go to 7-Eleven or your local convenience store and get one of those clip-on bottle holders. And the problem with it is that you set them right on your window, and it's a little click. A little clip, and it would rock and roll as you turned, and your soda would spill, and I did say soda. Some people say pop, but it would cause problems, and then sometimes you'd forget about it, and then you open up your car door, and then that stuff would spill all over your outfit, or spill all over your interior of your car when you close the car door. It was a mess. But I had this '85 Honda Civic, and I loved it. It was a little tank. It could go forever. And so I had the '85 Honda Civic. I lived in St. Louis, Missouri. I had moved about two blocks away from work because I had this 10-year-old car. I wanted to make sure that I would still be able to get to work, even if the car cut out on me. So I live 2 blocks away from work. It's 1994. There are a lot of things socially happening in 1994. There was this extremely huge, ginormous outpour of coffee and caffeine. I mean, there were coffee houses everywhere. It was like a coffee explosion that happened, and I got caught up in that tsunami of coffee. And so I became addicted to coffee, and so every morning I needed to make sure that I had my coffee. And so I got to a point where, I could not start my day without a good cup of joe. And so I got to a point where I learned how to brew my own coffee. I even had an espresso machine. I never quite got the hang of how I was supposed to use this espresso machine, but I got one because that's what you did in that part of the 90s. And so I had this, this issue with trying to get to work, and so I'd have to have my cup of joe. Now, because my car did not have cup holders, what kinds of cups do you think were easily accessible to me, that I had access to? Just regular old coffee cups. My grandmother's coffee mugs were what I used to transport that coffee. And since I live about 2 blocks away from work and I'm an American, how do you think I get to work? I obviously drive. One of the things I didn't tell you about the Honda was that the Honda was a manual transmission, or a standard transmission, which meant I need to push the clutch and use the gas with both feet. So I had to use both feet to drive the vehicle, and then I also had a stick that had to shift the gears. And so I needed to keep one hand on the steering wheel, one on the shifter, and both feet going at the same time. And so being an American and living 2 blocks away from work, what time do you think I leave for work? That's right, I leave about 10 minutes ahead of time, which means I'm going to be late. I already know that I'm going to be late. And so I grab my coffee mug, I jump in my car, I know I'm already going to be late, I've got to shift with both hands, I don't have a cup holder, and I'm doing all of this stuff, and I'm trying to park, and the parking space that I usually have is taken by somebody else. There's somebody, who's driving really slow, so I try to get around them, and by the time I get to work, what has happened to my coffee? It's spilled. I look like a mess. So I get to work, and I try to clean myself off, and people look at me and they say, on time again. So that kept happening for me, and finally I got to a point where I started to try to figure out what was going on and what was happening, and because it kept happening over and over again, until I finally realized what was happening. And so I'd like for you to think about this particular question, and then we'll come back and answer this question for you. Why is it that you think that micro-inequities happen, first of all? Secondly, why do you think that my coffee was spilling? What were the things that were going on in the environment? What was going on with me? What was happening that encouraged the spilling to happen out of my cup? So I want you to take a couple of minutes. In the next video, we'll decipher and tell you why it is that the coffee spilled. We'll be right back.